The appraiser's hands were shaking. Nadia Olek watched him crouch in the dirt beneath the rotted chicken coop, his flashlight beam catching on something that made him go completely still. He'd been talking nonstop for 20 minutes. Measurements, timber quality, foundation assessments. Now silence. Miss Olek, he finally said, his voice strange. You need to see this. That was 3 weeks after the auction. But it started earlier. October 7th, 2023. Marion County Courthouse, Salem, Oregon. The estate liquidation of the Kowalski property took 14 minutes. Lot 47, one dilapidated chicken coop, exact dimensions 12 feet by 16 feet, located on a quarter-acre parcel, property number 082-445-109. Zoning: agricultural, but the land had been abandoned for 9 years, since Eleanor Kowalski died intestate with no known heirs. Structure is unsound, the auctioneer droned. County says it's a tear down. Land is included, but access is limited. You'd need an easement from the neighboring property to bring in equipment. Do I hear $50? Nadia sat in the back row, 26 years old, with $847 in her checking account, and a dream that everyone said was stupid. She wanted a farm. Not modern industrial farming, the old way. Small scale, heritage breeds. The methods her babcia had written about in letters from Poland. Letters Nadia had found in her mother's attic after the funeral. Her babcia had kept chickens. Rare breeds. Beautiful birds with feathers like oil paintings. She'd written about them obsessively. I am simony, black copper marins, cream lid bars. When she came to America in 1952, she tried to bring fertile eggs sewn into a special belt. Most died. 2 hatched. From those 2 birds, she'd built something precious. Bloodlines that no longer existed in Europe, preserved through decades of careful breeding. Then she'd lost everything in a fire in 1989. The letter stopped after that. $50? The auctioneer repeated. No one spoke. The room smelled like coffee and old wood. Men in canvas jackets checked their phones. 25. Nadia's hand went up. $1. A few people laughed. The auctioneer looked annoyed. Bid increment is $25, ma'am. Minimum bid per county statute is $1 for condemned structures, Nadia said quietly. She'd read the regulations 3 times. No one else has bid. The auctioneer's jaw tightened. He checked his paperwork. $1 then. Anyone else? Silence. Sold. She signed the deed in a room that smelled like mildew. The clerk, a thin man named Robert, pushed a file folder across the desk. Survey map, tax records, condemnation notice. You've got 90 days to either restore the structure to code or demolish it. After that, county fines start. I understand. There's also this. He pulled out a separate envelope, yellowed with age. Eleanor Kowalski left a sealed letter with the county recorder in 1991. Instructions were to give it to whoever bought the property. That's you, I guess. Nadia took the envelope. Her hands were steady, but her heart wasn't. The name on the front, written in faded blue ink, for the one who sees value in what others abandon. She waited until she was in her car, a 1998 Honda Civic with 190,000 miles, before opening it. The letter inside was written in Polish. Her babcia's handwriting, unmistakable even after all these years. She read it twice, then sat in the courthouse parking lot and cried. That afternoon, the property was 40 minutes outside Salem, down a county road that turned to gravel, then to mud. The neighboring farm was cattle pasture, fenced with barbed wire. Nadia's quarter-acre sat behind a locked gate, overgrown with blackberry brambles and Douglas fir saplings. She parked on the road, climbed the gate, and pushed through the vegetation. Thorns caught her jacket. Mud sucked at her boots. It took 20 minutes to reach the chicken coop. It was worse than she'd imagined. The roof had collapsed on one side. The walls leaned like a truck. The door hung from one hinge. Blackberry vines had grown through the windows, and the whole structure was sinking into the soft Oregon earth. But the bones were good, old-growth timber, hand-cut joints, a foundation of river stones. Someone had built this to last. Nadia pulled out her babcia's letter and read it again in the fading light. My darling girl, if you are reading this, then you have inherited what I could not save. Look beneath. Always beneath. What burns above ground survives below. The bloodlines continue. Trust the old knowledge. The answer is in the foundation stones, eastern corner, 3 feet down. Do not tell anyone until you are certain. Protect them as I could not. Beneath, Nadia walked around the structure, testing the ground with her boot. The eastern corner was the most collapsed, the foundation stones visible where the earth had eroded away. She knelt in the mud and started digging with her hands. 3 feet down felt impossible, but she kept going, pulling out rocks, clay, rotted wood. Her fingers were numb. The light was failing. Then she hit something that wasn't earth. Metal. Flat. Cold. A box. She dug faster, prying it loose. It was the size of a large suitcase, made of galvanized steel, sealed with bolts that had rusted solid. Heavy 40 pounds, maybe more. Nadia dragged it free and sat in the mud, breathing hard, staring at what her babcia had buried 34 years ago. The light was nearly gone. She'd need tools to open it. She'd need time. She looked at the collapsing chicken coop, then at the box, then at the darkening Oregon sky. Whatever was inside had been worth hiding, worth protecting, worth waiting for. And now, somehow, it was hers. The bolts broke on the 4th day. Nadia had tried everything: penetrating oil, heat, leverage. Finally, she'd rented an angle grinder from the hardware store in Salem, $42 for 24 hours, and cut through the rusted metal in her apartment parking lot while her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, watched through curtains. The lid came free with a screech. Inside, wrapped in layers of oilcloth and plastic, 12 notebooks, a manila folder thick with papers, and 3 objects wrapped separately in waxed canvas. Nadia's hands trembled as she unwrapped the first object. A wooden egg, hand-carved, perfectly smooth, with a small brass plate. I am Semini, line 7, 1988. The second, another egg, slightly larger. Black copper marins, line 3, 1987. The third, cream lead bar, line 12, 1989. Not real eggs. Wooden models, precisely carved, exact replicas. Each one labeled with bloodline numbers and dates. The notebooks were breeding records. Page after page in her babcia's handwriting. Hatching dates, parentage charts, genetic traits, selection notes. Decades of work, documenting bloodlines that had taken generations to develop. Birds that had won awards in Poland before the war, brought to America as eggs, raised and refined through 40 years of obsessive selection. The manila folder held pedigree certificates, show awards, and correspondence with breeders across the country. And at the bottom, a letter from the American Poultry Association dated March 1989. Dear Mrs. Kowalski, we are pleased to inform you that your black copper marins have been accepted into the breeding program for genetic preservation. These birds represent the finest example of the European bloodline currently in North America. Please confirm your participation. Her babcia had been building something rare, something valuable, something that burned in a fire 7 months later. Nadia read through the night. The breeding records were meticulous, not just which birds to breed, but why, which traits to select for, which to eliminate, how to maintain genetic diversity in a small flock, how to recognize quality in a chick that was only days old. The last entry was dated April 3rd, 1989. Fire took everything. 40 years of work gone. But I saved the knowledge. Someday, someone will begin again. Nadia closed the notebook and looked at the wooden eggs. Then she called the number from the appraiser's card. 2 days later, Gregory Moss had been appraising rare poultry for 37 years. He arrived at Nadia's apartment in a Subaru wagon, carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than Nadia. She showed him the notebooks, the certificates, the breeding records. He read for 2 hours without speaking. Finally, where are the birds? Dead. They died in a fire in 1989. All of them. Yes. He looked devastated. Miss Olek, these records document bloodlines that were thought extinct. Your grandmother was preserving genetics that went back to pre-war Poland. If these birds still existed, they'd be worth, he paused, calculating. Conservatively? $50,000. Maybe more. Nadia's stomach dropped. But they don't exist. No. He touched the notebooks reverently. These records are historically significant. I could get you maybe $2,000 from a poultry museum. But without the birds. He trailed off. After he left, Nadia sat in her apartment and did math that didn't work. She had $805 left. The chicken coop needed $8,000 minimum to meet code. New roof, foundation repair, walls, windows. The county deadline was 73 days away. She could sell the notebooks for $2,000. Still nowhere close. That night, she read the breeding records again. Her babsha hadn't just documented what she'd bred, she'd documented how to recreate it. Starting birds to select, traits to look for, crossing strategies, selection pressure across generations. It was a blueprint, a recipe, not for preserving what existed, but for building it again. Nadia opened her laptop and started searching. Heritage poultry hatcheries, rare breed conservancies, birds that were distant, cousins to what her babsha had perfected. She made a list. Simony chicks, $50 each minimum. Black copper marins, $35. Preem light bars, $40. To start the bloodlines properly, she'd meet at least 20 birds. Total, $1,500 she didn't have. But then she found something else. A grant program through the Oregon Rare Breed Conservancy, funding for genetic preservation projects, up to $5,000 for applicants with documented heritage bloodlines and a viable breeding plan. Application deadline, October 30th, 9 days away. She worked for 72 hours straight, photocopied the breeding records, wrote a project proposal that outlined everything: the historical significance, the genetic value, the methodology to recreate the bloodlines using modern foundation stock, and her babsha's selection protocols. She submitted it at 11:47 p.m. on October 29th. The response came November 15th. Dear Miss Olek, we are pleased to award you a grant of $4,800 for your heritage bloodline restoration project. Additionally, the review board was so impressed with your documentation that we'd like to offer you consulting work with 3 of our member farms who are seeking to improve their breeding programs. Attached are their contact details. Congratulations. Nadia read it 3 times, then called Gregory Moss. I need to buy chicks, she said. The best foundation stock available. And I need to know how to turn that collapsing chicken coop into a proper breeding facility on a very tight budget. There was a pause. You're going to recreate the bloodlines? My babsha left me the knowledge. I'm not going to waste it. It'll take years, maybe a decade to get anywhere close to what she had. I know. Another pause. I'll help you. No fee. This is too important. The next morning, Nadia drove back to the property. The brambles seemed thicker, the coop more collapsed. But she learned something from her babsha's letters. The most valuable things are often buried, waiting for someone willing to dig. She'd found the knowledge. Now came the work. The first chicks arrived on December 3rd, shipped overnight in a heated box that cost more than the birds themselves. Nadia opened it in her apartment at 6 a.m. 12 tiny, peeping bundles of fluff. 6 Simony, pitch black from hatching. 4 black copper marins, dark with copper collars. 2 cream light bars, gray with distinctive racing stripes. Mrs. Chun from next door knocked on the door an hour later. Is something dying in there? Chickens, Nadia said. Baby chickens. Mrs. Chin looked at the cardboard brooder set up in Nadia's living room. Heat lamps, thermometers, feeding stations, and shook her head. You're crazier than I thought. But she brought over a bag of organic starter feed that afternoon. My daughter raises chickens in Portland. She says this is better than the commercial stuff. The coop renovation started that week. Gregory Moss connected her with a contractor named James who specialized in agricultural buildings. James looked at the structure, at Nadia's budget, for $1,200 after buying the chicks and equipment, and said, I can't make it pretty, but I can make it sound. They worked through December. Nadia did the labor she could afford to do herself, clearing brambles, digging drainage channels, hauling materials. James did the skilled work, reinforcing the foundation, replacing the collapsed roof section, installing proper ventilation. The breeding records became her Bible. Every evening, after 10-hour days of construction work, she'd read her babsha's notes by lamplight. How to assess a chick's potential at 4 weeks. Which traits were genetically linked. How to maintain detailed records that would guide selection for generations. The chicks grew. By 8 weeks, their personalities were distinct. Nadia named them by bloodline numbers, like her babsha had, but she knew each bird individually. Line 7A, the Simony rooster with the perfect comb. Line 3C, the black copper marin's hen who was already showing exceptional egg color genetics. Gregory visited in January, walking through the reconstructed coop. The roof was metal now, sloped for rain. The walls were plywood, insulated. The foundation was reinforced with concrete and proper drainage. Not fancy, but solid. Your grandmother would approve, he said quietly. The county inspector came on January 18th, clipboard in hand. He checked the foundation, the roof, the ventilation, the electrical. He was there for 40 minutes. Passes, he finally said. Structure is sound. Agricultural use approved. That night, Nadia moved the birds, now 16 weeks old, almost adult, from her apartment to their permanent home. They explored cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. The Semini roosters perched on the new roosts. The Marin's hens scratched in the deep bedding. Watching them, Nadia understood what her Babsha had meant in the letter. What burns above ground survives below. The birds had died, but the knowledge, the careful observations, the selection strategies, the bloodline wisdom that had survived, buried and waiting. The first eggs came in February. Small at first, imperfect, but Nadia documented everything. Weight, color, shell quality, which hen laid which egg. She started a new notebook, continuing where her Babsha's records ended. February 14th, 2024. First generation. Selection priorities. Egg color depth in Marins. Type in Semini. Blue egg genetics in lead bars. The consulting work started that same month. 3 farms, all trying to improve their heritage flocks. Nadia brought her Babsha's notebooks and taught what she was still learning herself. Observation, patience, selection pressure applied gently across generations. They paid her $75 an hour. It wasn't much, but it covered feed, utilities, and started paying down her credit card debt. By April, she had second-generation chicks hatching. Selecting the breeding pairs had taken months of observation, following her Babsha's protocols exactly. Only the best went into the breeding program. The rest she sold as quality heritage stock, $45 per chick, and she had waiting lists. Gregory came back in May with someone else, Dr. Sarah Chun from Oregon State University's Agricultural Genetics Program. Mr. Moss showed me your documentation, Dr. Chun said, walking through the coop. The bloodline records, the selection methodology. This is doctoral-level breeding work. Have you considered formalizing this? There's grant money for genetic preservation research. I'm not a researcher, Nadia said. I'm just following my grandmother's notes. Your grandmother was doing research. She just didn't call it that. Dr. Chun paused by the Semini pen, watching the birds. How would you feel about teaching a workshop? We have a sustainable agriculture program. Students who'd benefit from learning these old methods. That summer, Nadia taught her first class. 8 students, meeting at her property every Saturday. She showed them the notebooks, explained the selection principles, let them handle the birds and practice assessment. One student, a woman named Maria, asked, "Why does this matter? We can just buy hatching eggs online." Nadia thought about her Babsha's letters, about knowledge almost lost, about the 40 years of work that had burned. Because genetics are a library, she said. Every bloodline is a book. When we lose them, we lose stories we can't rewrite. This, she gestured at the coop, the birds. This is preserving what almost disappeared. The following September, exactly 1 year after the auction, Nadia's birds won Best of Breed in all 3 categories at the Oregon State Poultry Show. The judge, an old man named Harold who'd been judging shows for 40 years, pulled her aside. "Where did you get these bloodlines?" "My grandmother. She bred them before I was born." He looked at the birds again. The Semini's perfect type, the Marin's deep chocolate eggs, the leg bar's auto-sexing clarity. "I thought these lines were extinct. I judged birds for a woman named Kowalski back in the 80s. These look like hers." "They are hers," Nadia said. "I'm just continuing her work." That evening, standing in the rebuilt coop with her ribbons hung on the wall, Nadia opened her Babsha's letter one more time. She'd read it so many times she'd memorized it, but holding the paper felt important. The bloodlines continue. Yes, Babsha. They do. Outside, the Oregon rain started, soft and steady. The metal roof drummed. The birds settled on their roosts, murmuring. The notebook sat on the shelf, her grandmother's and hers side by side, documenting the past and the future. She'd bought a collapsing chicken coop for $1. Underneath, she'd found something everyone said was worthless. Old papers, wooden eggs, faded records. But her Babsha had known the truth. The most precious things aren't what you can hold. They're what you know, what you preserve, what you pass on. Nadia turned off the light and locked the coop door. Tomorrow she'd hatch another generation. The work continued.